It is the day after the risen Christ. We are sitting here the day after the day of the risen Christ. Easter. Okay, I'm done. I figured, since I'm bored out of my damn mind, waiting for the wife, what the hell, I'll make a video. She doesn't like having to sit there and, wait while I'm making videos. Which I don't tell her to do, she just does it anyway. Anyway, this day, I was talking to a dude earlier. Well, more like he commented on one of my videos. And it was about the David and Goliath story. See, in the original text, the one that's in Hebrew, they don't specify on the size of the parameters of David, nor do they specify on the height of Goliath. I mean, Goliath literally means huge. It's literally what the name means. If you have a Goliath tank, you have a huge freaking tank. But, in the news stories, they're talking about how Goliath was like 9'9", which would be considered giant in those standards. Today's standards, we got basketball players that were that tall. The tallest man in the world was like 9'10" or something, and he was an Asian dude. I think. Maybe he was an English dude. I don't remember. Anyway, 9'9" really isn't that tall. And I mean, like I said, back in those days, the average male height was like 5 foot tall. So anybody whose crotch was at your face would be considered a giant. And, again, no historical evidence of the story, but it's, people are saying, it's a good story because it tells you about how to be brave in the face of tyranny. Okay, it's also, I mean, yeah, you should be brave in tyranny. You should always be brave. Don't take the coward's way out. Be brave. That's definitely the one thing that I advocate for, is being brave. Even when you don't have to be. Being brave can be the scariest thing in the world. Like the whole bully concept, standing up to your bullies, standing up to the teachers who bully you, the family that bullies you. It's hard, it's harder to stand up to your family than it is to stand up to, just random people. Standing up to your friends and family is the hardest thing to do. Trust me, it took me 16 plus years to even stand up to my own mother. So, I mean, it's not easy. But, according to the storyline, Goliath was running rampant, destroying villages and all this crap, which he may well have done. But, then they say this guy named David, who was supposedly basically a child with a slingshot, is what he was. And it's not a slingshot of today. A slingshot of today, we use rubber, we use metal balls. This was just a sling, basically. It was a sling that you spun around your head, you let one part of the string go, and the rock would fly. No, they don't specify how big the rock was. They don't specify exactly where they said he hit him in the head. Which, yes, hitting someone in the head hard enough could kill them. They could, fracture the skull, internal bleeding, death. It would not be an instant death. So, it probably scared the hell out of everybody when Goliath was on the ground screaming in agony because some dude just threw a rock at his damn head. And like I said, you really don't hear this, you only hear the story of the one side. Like I said, you don't hear the story of Goliath. Maybe Goliath wasn't trying to trample through everything. Maybe he's just a big clumsy oaf. But, again, people take it as face value. David was Jewish. He was, according to the histories, the David of the Bible could be talking about King David, which would mean that David was never a peasant. That's the only David that I've heard in history in that specific area of time that... Sorry to turn on my heater. Got a little cold. Wherever the hell you're at, it's probably warm. It's freezing cold over here. Anyway, David was a prince. He wasn't a peasant. So, the whole, a peasant killed Goliath and became a leader. He was already a warlord. If you go by the actual text, not just the text from the Bible, the text that people wrote about David. David was an asshole, for one. And, there's a spin on it. They say, everything's a metaphor. All right? So you have the armies of David going against the armies of a man named Goliath. Which, Goliath can mean many things. It can mean the guy was freakishly huge, which, like I said, compared to those standards, I would be a freakishly huge guy. I'm 6 foot tall. Most of these guys barely reached 5'3", 5'6". So I would have been just gigantic to these guys. It would have been like an Asian samurai meeting up with a Viking from the Netherlands. Vikings, their average height was 6'6". They were huge, huge men and women. The Vikings valued their women and their men. It wasn't just one-sided thing, like, the book. Anyway, back in those desert times, anybody who was, like I said, any over the height of 6 foot was considered a giant. Just like in today's society, anybody under I think it's like 4'11" is considered a dwarf. Which is funny because that's about average height back then. Malnourishment, malnutrition. They weren't that big, and they weren't that old either. Nobody lived past probably 40, 50 at the max. Like the story of what is his name, King Solomon. There's no way the man would have been able to do any of the stuff that they said he did in the Bible. Maybe half of it. If he did everything like back to back to back to back to back. He never went back to his kingdom. He just kept conquering. That's the only way any of these Solomon's things would have actually worked. Would have actually been able to go through. Now, I think it was 2010, 2009, somewhere on there, they actually found a tomb that they said could be King Solomon. That Solomon, according to the stories, walked with a limp, and they found stuff of the carcass that could signify that, he did walk with a limp. He was 6 foot tall, which would have made him an extraordinarily huge guy to these people, which is why they looked up to him. Not just figuratively, literally. They had to look up to the guy to talk to him. It'd be like me talking to Shaq. The guy's 8 foot fucking tall. I'm like up to his belly button, man. I'd be like, "Hi, buddy." He's a big dude. But anyway, when it comes to these stories, everybody's like, "Oh, well, they're not literal." Then why do you take everything else literal? It's the same story, the same bullshit all the time. Well, some stories you should take literal, some stories you should only take, with a grain of salt. How do you pick and choose? Or better yet, why do you pick and choose? If the Bible, which again was wrote by man, along with, like what the guy said, I completely agree with him. Every religious holiday was wrote by man, was invented by man. So was the book, so was God, so was the Jesus theory. And, the evidence of creating a God is everywhere. There were thousands upon thousands upon thousands, some say even millions of different gods through the millenniums and the decades and the years and all that. The further science got along, the more we got to experiment and find out that, a god doesn't control water. The moon, we have lunar cycles that do. Guess what happened? Poseidon lost his power. The only god that hasn't seemed to lose his power yet is the one that nobody can disprove or prove for. Nobody has ever died and came back. Anybody who says, I had a near-death experience. Yeah, you were nearly dead. You didn't die. And even if you did, if you're an extreme religious person, how can we take your word at face value? How can we take your quote-unquote evidence when nobody else saw what you saw? No, that's the problem. Like when someone says, I had personal things that happened to me to make me believe in God. Okay, that's not evidence. That could be, you could be blinded by a religiosity, mostly family is like that. And I said, religion started with a couple of people and they made up a story. That's how all religions start. It's a story completely made up a fabrication made up so people can explain the unexplainable. That's what religion is. And almost every religion out there is some way, especially the Judeo-Christian beliefs, it's a death cult, man. You know, you glorify death, and yet you fear death. Why? You know, why would you fear something if you're so entranced in thinking that you're going to heaven? Why would you fear it? You know, why would you fear death? Why not welcome it? You know, you're about to go see your maker, you know, the maker you believe in. Why would you fear death? It's like, why would you fear God? If you think in your heart that you're right, then that's all that matters, according to this religion. It doesn't matter what anybody else believes. It matters what you believe in here. You know, your brain apparently fools your heart, according to this theory. You know, there was a leading scientist back in the 90s who was an extraordinary scientist, you know, had multiple PhDs, doctorates in science stuff. You know, in geology and history and chemistry and all this stuff. His religion... Sorry, I'm a smoker. I don't have COVID-19. Trust me, if I did, I'd let you guys know. Anyway, this doctor took the Bible, and anything that has been proven wrong by science and history was thrown out. Anything that was already explained away, that we already know that God didn't do, he threw out. So take this book right here, which is half the size, if not a third of the size, of the Bible he was using. Out of that, this much was left. That's it. Literally, maybe 50 pages out of the whole book. And it wasn't these little, you know, abridged versions that we read today. It was the extensive, like, 5,000 page freaking tomes of the book. And, you know, he bought the book, so he could do whatever the hell he wants with it. It's just a book. You know, even if you roll it up into a doobie, it's still a damn book. Anyway. At the end of all this, instead of thinking, you know, well, maybe science is right, he dropped all of his science degrees and everything and became a preacher. Why? Is it that scary just to say, I don't know? It's like you know, science doesn't say that it has all the answers. No scientist can ever say we have all the answers. Religion says they have all the answers. Says, well, God's the creator. God does this. God does that. Anytime, it's called the God of the gaps. Anytime that science has not been able to prove something, then that's when they put in God. You know, take away education, throw in religion. That's basically what they do. And they've done it through the years countless times. And anytime someone disproved it, the first thing that they always do is they discredit that specific person. You know, they discredit Galileo. They discredited Einstein. They discredited so many of these intellectually magnificent minds. Hell, they try to discredit Stephen Hawking until they realize that this guy's a fuck lot smarter than they are. You know, anytime a scientist comes out with something that explains something that the Bible says God does, they discredit him. They bash him. You know, it took the Catholic Church 50 years after the death of Galileo to believe in gravity. Okay. To believe in Copernicus? It's the experiment of the proof that the Earth isn't the center of the universe, that the Earth revolves around the sun. Copernicus, the Copernicus theory, which has been proven time and time again. Also the fact that the Earth is round, you retards. For any of you flat Earth dum-dums out there. Anyway, they discredited Copernicus for a very long time. Like, almost to the point to where nobody believed anything he said. And then the Catholic Church said they tried to invent it. Said they were trying to prove that the earth was round, that the earth was not the center of the universe, that they were preaching and saying was the center of the universe for thousands of years. Or, sorry, hundreds of years. And when people realized, wait, Copernicus came out with this first, the Catholic Church lost a lot of their credibility. So did the Christians. Because the the Catholics weren't the only ones who said the earth was the center of the universe. So did Christians, so did Jews. You know, to be fair, most religious people thought that. And in that time, everybody believed that. Except for the Romans, apparently, who had pagan deities, by the way. They were paganists. They believed in... See, they were polytheistic. They believed in multiple gods. Yet, these guys, over 2,000 years ago, before the birth of Christ, before the birth of Christianity, before anybody even knew what the hell the word Christianity meant, or that the word Christianity even came from, was even invented, the Romans already knew that the earth was not the center of the universe. Sorry, it's getting cold again, guys. You might not be able to hear me very well. But anyway, they already knew this. Like, I think the earliest recollection of them saying this sorry, that was really loud. Anyway, the earliest recollection of them saying this was like 500 BC, which was the start of the Roman Empire, like the start of the massive Roman Empire, like when they became the powerhouse of the world. That's when they started, doing this, when they started realizing, hey, this shit's wrong. They believed the same thing. They believed the earth was flat. They believed all this shit. And then they started exploring and realized the earth is round. They did experiments that you could still do today to prove that the earth is round. To prove that the earth is more than just 9,000 years old. Humankind has been around for at least 180,000. Intellectual humans, by the way. And that's just the ones that we know of. They've actually found evidence of humans in Asia, actually, 360,000 years ago. So, when they say 180,000 years ago, that's when they started moving from Africa. That's what they thought. But when they found these tools and they found actual remains of humans from 360,000 years ago in Asia, dude, there's still so much about humankind ourselves that we don't even know. And for someone to sit there and say, oh, the world's only 9,000 years old, you're a ding-dong. You might as well just take your brain, grind it up, and shove it down the toilet. And take a dump on it while you're at it, because you are that stupid. If you honestly believe the earth is only 9,000 years old. Or at max 20. Like, dude, the pyramids are a couple thousand years old by themselves. No, the Sphinx is, I think, 3,000 years old. Just because we didn't have a written history does not mean humans weren't around. It just means we didn't know how to read or write. Which, again, in the times of David and Goliath, in the times of Jesus, in the times of Moses, none of these tribes that these guys came from knew how to read or write. You were considered an extraordinary person if you could even read, let alone write. Yes, they may have been able to talk. Anybody could talk. Even monkeys talk to each other. We just don't understand it. Dogs talk to each other. Hell, my dog talks shit to me. That damn dog has an attitude, man. I love her to death, but man, she's got an attitude problem. Anyway, just because we didn't have written word does not mean that humans weren't around. Does not mean that Neanderthal man was as dumb as they thought he was. They use this thing, I think it's called cuneiform. If I'm saying the word correctly, it's picture writing. And, they found that in cave drawings. And again, they found that think it was 200,000 years ago in caves. You know, like I said, just because we didn't have writing does not mean we weren't intelligent people. You know, everybody's like, oh, well, the Romans were idiots, the ancient Egyptians were dumb. Really, the ancient Egyptians invented batteries. They had electricity. There's no way these guys were dumb. I mean, some of the stuff they did, I mean, they found out how to mummify a body by pulling the brain through the nose without disturbing any facial features. Well, anyway, I'm going to have to cut this short because my wife's finally off of work. You guys have a good day.